The household. You take the 850,000 households in the city of Houston, and the average cost is $12,000 a year.
And then, the second one, I grew up in New York City when everybody was moving out to the suburbs because of the high crime rate in the city, and people moved out to the suburbs as a way of escaping crime and a whole lot of other things. And you're talking now about coming back into the cities, and I'm a city slicker, I love cities, but you mentioned crime, reduction of crime is one of your reasons for why people should move back into the cities, and I'd like to see you address that a little bit too.
Well, what I was saying, we got a lot of challenges in Houston, in the city. By the way, this crime has spread to the suburbs too. And it's another issue, but what I'm saying is that we're such a spread out, poorly planned, disjointed street system. I mean, I've showed subdivision plans to police officers and firemen, and they say, we'd never drive a fire truck in there. We wouldn't want to go into that area with a police car because there's no way to get out. And our response time for fire and police is delayed in Houston because we have such a poorly disconnected street system, because we don't have the kind of planning that we should have. And so as a result, you know, it's ironic, but we give Mayor Giuliani the credit. He hired this police chief in New York, William Bratton, and now statistically New York is the safest city in America. Los Angeles is the second safest. Bratton is now the police chief in Los Angeles. And we're, of the 9 large cities over 1 million, we're the second most dangerous. So it has to do with the built environment. We got to build a safer environment that's easier and cheaper to police.
So you're saying that by having density, it becomes easier to police.
Well, we do need to have at least the density that Los Angeles has, and one of the reasons our density is so low because the development is very fragmented. By the way, that means you know, Los Angeles has twice the population of Houston. I think that's about right. But we've got more miles of sewer lines in Los Angeles. So you see the fragmentation, the density leads to terrible inefficiencies, terrible.
Thank you.
And the taxpayers, any taxpayers in this room, you all are the ones who are suffering. You're paying for all this inefficiency. And I think we can change it.
Thank you.
When I saw Peter's graph, I thought that's a great picture, because all the money we're saving here in Houston, Texas on our housing affordability, we're spending on better cars. So what a great picture that was.
Auto dealers like that, right?
First off, Councilmember Brown, I'd like to thank you for coming. This type of discussion certainly helps the dialogue. Secondarily, I'm interested in your discussion of the suburbs versus the city as an outlier from not even Texas, God forbid. I'm interested in what is the difference in the regulatory environment in Houston versus the suburbs?
Well, the places where most of the growth in the suburb, but not all of it, is going are highly regulated. They have zoning. You know, there's, and I'm not pushing for zoning, but I'm just saying they have planning and zoning, whether it's Sugarland, Pearland, or de facto zoning in the planned communities, highly regulated. And when you're in a planned community, they say, this is our plan, these are our standards, and if you want to build in here with all these wonderful amenities and the golf course and everything, you can do that. And the builders respond, and that's where they build. There are portions of the county which are not regulated, and there's substantial growth out there. They're mostly in municipal utility districts. So, but if you total it up, all the areas that have the regulation in the region where the growth is, most of the growth, particularly in the last 5 years, is not happening in the unregulated part of the region. It's happening in the regulated parts. And that's because investors want this confidence. You know, there are pension funds and large pension funds who will not invest in the city of Houston because we don't have any decent regulations. There's no predictability. And there are developers, there are national developers who won't build in the city of Houston. there are home builders, and I've talked to a number of them, who won't build in the city of Houston because we don't have any regulations. I would submit that if we want a choice and more economic opportunity, we got to have some kind of regulations that give these investors and also existing residents confidence in what the future is going to be.
So you're suggesting the market is demanding regulation?
That what?
The market is demanding regulation?
The market gravitates to regulated environments. Look at Dallas. Dallas is booming downtown. They've got the projects that we wish we had. Victory Park. And they use these tools that my friend here is a little worried about. They use these tools to help developers, to encourage development, to help them make more money, to make their projects better. And this is a very, very important tool that the city uses. But you can look around the country, and I think it's pretty clear that the money goes to where there's some predictability.
This is my chance to talk about Dallas, which I'm very excited about. Dallas has just sent 4 or 5 people to jail for selling their zoning votes. Who's better off?
I knew I shouldn't have mentioned Dallas. I knew it. San Antonio.
San Antonio's next. Who's better off, the homeowner in Houston that lives on the edge of the neighborhood and perhaps paid a little less money because he is on the edge of a deed-restricted neighborhood, and that homeowner knows that he is subject to some risk about what might come up and be next to him? Who's better off, that homeowner who gets a little discount and knows the risk he's getting into, or a similar homeowner in Dallas who lies on the edge of a neighborhood and banks on the fact that there is a zoning line that supposedly protects him in the buffer area? Well, in Dallas, they've gotten very good at commoditizing, however you say that word, selling, either appropriately or inappropriately, moves in the line. So in Dallas, the line moves because you can't repeal the law of supply and demand, and as values climb, there's more and more pressure to move the line. And so you end up in the same place, next to something that's not residential. But in Dallas, you got fooled. In Houston, you always knew that that was a risk. So who's better off? I would assert that the one in Houston is. San Antonio is a hard one to compare because its city limit goes out so far, there really isn't anything beyond the city limit. So because of a great annexation policy, their numbers just don't add up.
Well, I'm not for more annexation if that's what you're calling for.
No, I'm just telling you what's wrong with San Antonio.
Thank you very much. Councilman Brown, I would like to address and ask about your use of the term sustainable development, because this is a highly charged term, and I wanted to make mention of this because you did use this term tonight. In 1992, the United Nations published a document called Agenda 21. And in Agenda 21, they outlined what the United Nations saw as the unifying principle around which all of the world ought to be organized. And in this document, they used the term sustainable development quite heavily. And they used it in the same way you used it, in the sense that cities ought to be more dense, cities ought to abandon the automobile in favor of mass transit, that cities ought to erect borders and reduce development on the outside of the border and increase infill development, brownfield development. All of that is discussed by the United Nations. And I just wanted to know, in view of the fact that I think we can agree that the United Nations knows nothing of, nor have they ever entered into the thought of anything close to the American dream, that this term that you've used, I just want to know, are you aware of the origin of it and the implication of it?
Well, I know what you're referring to.